My name is Melanie Carter, and I'm 20 years old. Standing at the altar in my grandmother's vintage lace wedding dress, I should have been the happiest woman alive. Instead, I was staring at empty pews where my entire family should have been sitting. My mother Linda, my sister Kristen, my brother Jake, gone. Vanished without a single explanation. Tyler, my groom, kept glancing nervously at his relatives, who were whispering and pointing at the glaringly obvious absence of my side of the church. The pastor cleared his throat awkwardly, suggesting we wait a few more minutes. That's when my phone started buzzing with an unknown number, and everything I thought I knew about my family was about to shatter completely. Before I dive into this unbelievable story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around to see how this wedding disaster turned into the biggest betrayal of my life. Growing up, I always thought I had the perfect family. My mother Linda was my best friend, my sister Kristen was my confidant, and my brother Jake was my protector. We did everything together: family vacations, holiday traditions, Sunday dinners. When I got engaged to Tyler 18 months ago, they seemed genuinely thrilled for me. Linda cried happy tears when I showed her the ring, Kristen immediately started planning my bachelorette party, and Jake joked about giving Tyler the protective big brother speech. The wedding planning process had been a dream come true. Linda helped me choose the venue, a beautiful historic church downtown that had been my grandmother's choice for her own wedding 60 years ago. Kristen spent countless Saturday afternoons with me trying on dresses until we found the perfect one. Jake offered to handle the music playlist and coordinate with Tyler's groomsmen. Every detail seemed to fall into place with their enthusiastic support. Even the finances worked out perfectly when my grandmother's inheritance came through 6 months ago. She had left me $45,000 specifically for my wedding, with a note saying she wanted me to have the celebration of my dreams. My family was so excited about the gift, with Linda helping me set up a separate savings account to keep the wedding money safe. She even suggested I give her power of attorney over that account since I had been in the hospital for a minor surgery last year, and it would be easier for her to handle vendor payments while I recovered. But looking back now, there had been warning signs I was too blind to see. 3 months ago, the whispered conversations that stopped whenever I entered a room became more frequent. Linda would quickly hang up phone calls when I walked into the kitchen. Kristen started avoiding my texts about final wedding details. Jake seemed distracted and nervous whenever we discussed the upcoming ceremony. The day before my wedding, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. During our rehearsal dinner, my family barely spoke to Tyler's relatives. They made excuses to leave early, claiming they needed to get beauty sleep for the big day. When I hugged Linda goodbye that night, she held on longer than usual and whispered, "I love you so much, sweetheart. Remember that no matter what happens." At the time, I thought she was just being emotional about her baby getting married. The morning of my wedding started strangely too. Usually, Linda would have been at my apartment at dawn with coffee and breakfast, ready to help me get ready. Instead, she texted saying she was running late due to a hair appointment emergency. Kristen's excuse was a last-minute dress alteration. Jake claimed his car wouldn't start. Each excuse seemed reasonable individually, but together they created a pattern I should have recognized. When I arrived at the church 2 hours before the ceremony, the parking lot was nearly empty. Tyler's family was there setting up flowers and making final preparations, but there was no sign of mine. I called Linda 3 times with no answer. Kristen's phone went straight to voicemail. Jake didn't even acknowledge my texts. The wedding planner, Mrs. Henderson, kept asking when my family would arrive for photos, and I found myself making excuses for them. As guests began arriving for the 4 o'clock ceremony, the divide became painfully obvious. Tyler's side filled up completely while mine remained empty except for a few coworkers and college friends. I could hear the murmurs starting. Tyler's aunt asked his mother loudly where my family was, and I watched his mother's face flush with embarrassment as she tried to deflect the question. Standing in the bridal preparation room, watching through the window as more of Tyler's relatives filed in and took seats, I felt the first real stab of panic. This wasn't just lateness anymore. this was abandonment. Mrs. Henderson gently suggested we might want to delay the ceremony, but Tyler was already in position at the altar, and canceling would create an even bigger scene. The walk down the aisle was the longest of my life. Every step echoed in the church as I faced row after row of Tyler's family and friends, all craning their necks to see where my people were. Tyler's face went from nervous excitement to confused concern as he realized I was walking alone. No father to give me away, no mother crying in the front row, no siblings beaming with pride. Just me, my bouquet, and a growing sense of dread that something was terribly, horribly wrong. Standing at that altar, trying to maintain some dignity while Tyler squeezed my hand supportively, I felt my phone buzzing insistently in the small clutch purse my maid of honor was holding. Pastor Williams was doing his best to proceed with the ceremony, but even he seemed rattled by the obvious absence of half the wedding party. When the buzzing continued for the fourth time, I finally whispered to Tyler that I needed to step away for just a moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Williams announced with forced cheer, "let's take a brief pause while the bride handles an urgent matter." The murmurs from Tyler's family grew louder as I hurried down the aisle, my train trailing behind me like a symbol of the disaster this day had become. In the church vestibule, I answered the call with shaking hands. "This is Detective Morrison with the Metro Police Department. Am I speaking with Melanie Carter?" The official tone in his voice made my stomach drop. "Yes, this is Melanie. Is everything okay? Is my family hurt?" The silence that followed felt like an eternity. "Miss Carter, I'm calling because your father, Raymond Carter, was arrested approximately 2 hours ago on charges of embezzlement from his accounting firm. We found your contact information listed as his emergency contact." The words hit me like a physical blow. Embezzlement? My father was one of the most honest, ethical people I knew. There had to be some mistake. But Detective Morrison continued with details that made my blood run cold. "We've been investigating Mr. Carter for several months following complaints from multiple clients about missing funds. The total amount appears to be around $180,000 stolen over a 2-year period." I slumped against the church wall, my wedding dress pooling around me like a symbol of everything that was falling apart. "Detective, there has to be some mistake," I whispered, but even as I said it, pieces started clicking into place. Dad's new car last year that he claimed was a business lease. The family vacation to Europe that Mom said was paid for with his bonus. The expensive renovations to their kitchen that Dad insisted on despite Mom's protests about the cost. "I'm afraid there's more, Miss Carter. During the investigation, we discovered that your mother, Linda Carter, has been accessing your personal savings account. The account that contained your wedding funds has been completely emptied as of yesterday morning. The money was transferred to pay for your father's legal representation." The phone nearly slipped from my trembling hands. $45,000. My grandmother's gift. The money for my dream wedding, for my future with Tyler, stolen by my own mother. "But she has power of attorney," I said weakly, though even I knew that didn't make this legal or right. "Power of attorney doesn't extend to theft, Miss Carter. Using someone else's inheritance without permission, even with access to the account, constitutes fraud. We'd like to speak with you about pressing charges." Detective Morrison's voice was sympathetic but professional. "Your family was apparently aware of the pending arrest. We have phone records showing your mother contacted a lawyer yesterday morning using funds from your account." Through the church doors, I could hear Pastor Williams trying to keep Tyler's family entertained with small talk about the beautiful flowers. Tyler appeared in the doorway, his face etched with concern as he saw me crying in my wedding dress. "Mel, what's happening? Should I cancel everything?" His voice was so gentle, so full of love, and I realized that while my biological family had betrayed me in the worst possible way, this man was choosing to stand by me even as our wedding day imploded. "They knew," I whispered into the phone, the full horror of the situation hitting me. "My family knew my father was going to be arrested today. They knew they'd stolen my wedding money. They knew they were abandoning me at my own wedding, and they did it anyway." The rage that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not just anger at the theft, but fury at the calculated cruelty of letting me stand at that altar, humiliated in front of everyone who mattered to Tyler. Detective Morrison arranged to meet us at the station within the hour. As Tyler helped me gather my train and walked me back toward the altar, I looked out at his family's confused and concerned faces. These people had spent money on gifts, taken time off work, traveled from out of state to celebrate what they thought would be the happiest day of my life. They deserved an explanation, and more importantly, Tyler deserved a bride who could focus on their future instead of the wreckage of her past. "Can everyone please take a seat?" I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. Tyler stood beside me, his hand firmly in mine as I faced the congregation. "I need to let you all know that there's been a family emergency, and we're going to need to postpone the ceremony. Thank you all so much for being here today. Tyler and I appreciate your love and support more than you know." The disappointment was palpable, but Tyler's family responded with immediate offers of help and concern. As guests began filing out, offering hugs and promises to reschedule their travel, Mrs. Henderson approached with practical concerns about vendor payments and deposits. That's when the second wave of financial reality hit. Not only had my family stolen my wedding funds, but I was now liable for cancellation fees and vendor costs that I no longer had the money to cover. Tyler's parents immediately stepped forward, insisting they would handle any immediate expenses, but I could see the shock in their eyes as they began to understand the scope of what my family had done. The Metro police station smelled like disinfectant and despair, a fitting backdrop for what would become the most heartbreaking conversation of my life. Tyler had insisted on coming with me, still in his wedding tuxedo, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck like a symbol of our derailed plans. Detective Morrison met us at the front desk, his kind eyes taking in my wedding dress with obvious sympathy. "Miss Carter, before we go any further, I want you to know that you're a victim here. What your family did to you today goes beyond simple theft. It's a calculated betrayal designed to leave you vulnerable and isolated." His words were meant to be comforting, but they only confirmed my worst fears about the people I'd trusted most in the world. Raymond Carter sat in the interview room looking nothing like the father who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework. His hair was disheveled, his usually pristine business shirt wrinkled and stained. But what struck me most was the absence of shame in his expression. Instead, he looked angry, as if he were the wronged party in this situation. "Melanie, thank God you're here," he said the moment I walked in. "I need you to tell them this is all a misunderstanding. The money from your account was always meant to be family money. Your grandmother intended that inheritance to help all of us, not just for some frivolous party." The casual dismissal of my wedding as frivolous hit like a slap across the face. Detective Morrison placed a folder on the table between us. "Mr. Carter, we have bank records showing systematic theft from 6 different clients over 24 months. We also have documentation of the unauthorized transfer from your daughter's account yesterday morning. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is felony embezzlement and fraud." But Dad continued his manipulation, turning those familiar brown eyes on me with practiced vulnerability. "Sweetheart, you have to understand. I was trying to protect the family. The business hit some rough patches, and I borrowed money with every intention of paying it back. When the investigation started, we needed emergency funds for legal representation. Your wedding money was just sitting there, and we figured we could replace it before you noticed." The audacity was breathtaking. They had planned to steal my inheritance, use it to bail Dad out of his criminal charges, and somehow replace it before my wedding day without me ever finding out. It was such a fundamental misunderstanding of basic decency that I actually laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "Dad, my wedding was today. Today. You didn't borrow the money, you stole it. And you didn't just steal money, you stole my wedding day, my dignity, and my trust in the people who were supposed to love me most." My voice grew stronger with each word as the full scope of their betrayal became clear. Detective Morrison opened the folder and spread out phone records and bank statements. "Miss Carter, these documents show that your mother contacted 3 different lawyers yesterday morning, using funds transferred from your account. The transfers were made at 6:47 a.m., which means this wasn't a last-minute panic decision. This was premeditated. The timeline hit me like a sledgehammer. While I was getting my nails done for my wedding, Mom was stealing my money. While I was having my final dress fitting, she was hiring lawyers to defend Dad's embezzlement charges. While I was writing my wedding vows about love and trust and family, my family was actively plotting to destroy the happiest day of my life. Tyler had been silent through most of the interview, but now he leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, with all due respect, Melanie trusted you with her inheritance because she loved you. She gave your wife power of attorney because she trusted your family. Using that trust to steal from her and then abandoning her at our wedding isn't protecting anyone. It's abuse." Dad's mask finally slipped, revealing the manipulative person he'd apparently always been. "You don't understand what it's like to have your entire life's work threatened. I built that accounting practice from nothing. I have employees who depend on me, clients who trust me. Melanie's wedding was one day, but my reputation is my legacy." "Your reputation?" I stood up, my wedding dress rustling with a sudden movement. "Dad, you destroyed your reputation when you decided to steal from your clients. You destroyed your legacy when you chose to fund your defense by stealing from your daughter. And you destroyed our family when you decided that your problems were more important than my happiness." Detective Morrison intervened before the argument could escalate further. "Miss Carter, you have several options here. You can choose to press charges against your mother for unauthorized use of your funds, which would be a separate case from your father's embezzlement charges. You can also pursue civil litigation to recover the stolen money and any additional damages." The weight of the decision settled on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. Pressing charges against my mother meant fully severing ties with my family. It meant admitting that the people who raised me, who I loved deeply despite their betrayal, were criminals who had victimized me in the cruelest possible way. But not pressing charges meant letting them get away with destroying my wedding day and stealing my future. Tyler's hand found mine under the table, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," he whispered. "But you deserve justice, and you deserve people in your life who treat you with respect." Through the station's windows, I could see Linda, Kristen, and Jake pacing in the parking lot. Even from a distance, their body language screamed anger rather than remorse. They weren't here to apologize or make amends. They were here to pressure me into dropping charges and protecting Dad from the consequences of his actions. Looking at them, I realized that our family dynamic had always been about protecting Dad's image and ego, even when it came at my expense. Today was just the most obvious example of a pattern that had probably been going on my entire life. The automatic doors of the police station slid open with a mechanical wheeze as my family stormed in like an army preparing for battle. Linda's face was flushed with righteous indignation, her carefully applied makeup smeared from crying, though whether from grief or anger, I couldn't tell. Kristen followed close behind, her bridesmaid dress wrinkled and her jaw set in that stubborn expression I'd seen countless times during our childhood arguments. Jake brought up the rear, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his eyes darting everywhere except to meet mine. "Melanie Catherine Carter, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Linda's voice carried across the waiting area, drawing stares from other families dealing with their own crises. The use of my full name was a power play, an attempt to reduce me to the little girl who used to cower when Mom used that tone. But standing there in my wedding dress, holding Tyler's hand, I felt more like an adult than I ever had before. "I'm pressing charges against the people who stole my inheritance and abandoned me at my own wedding," I replied, my voice steady despite the way my heart was hammering against my ribcage. "The question is, what do you think you're doing here?" Kristen stepped forward, her face twisted with an ugly expression I'd never seen before. "We're trying to save this family from your selfish tantrum. Do you have any idea what you're doing to Dad? He could go to prison because you're too spoiled to understand that sometimes families have to make sacrifices for each other." The word "spoiled" hit me like a physical blow. This from my sister, who had never worked a day in her life, whose car payments I'd helped with last year when she was between jobs. This from the woman who had borrowed my designer clothes for job interviews and never returned them. The hypocrisy was staggering. "Sacrifices?" I laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to cut glass. "Kristen, what exactly did you sacrifice?" Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you all decided to sacrifice me to save Dad from the consequences of his own criminal actions. Tyler moved closer to my side, his presence a solid reminder that I wasn't alone in this nightmare. His hand rested protectively on my lower back as he addressed my family with barely controlled anger. Mrs. Carter, with all due respect, Melanie didn't choose to sacrifice anything. You all made that choice for her. You stole her money, you lied to her for months, and you left her standing at the altar without a single explanation. That's not family sacrifice. That's betrayal. Jake finally spoke up, his voice weak and pleading. Mel, come on. You know we didn't want it to go this way. We thought maybe we could figure something out, maybe postpone the wedding until things got sorted out with Dad's situation. We never meant for you to get hurt. You never meant for me to get hurt? The rage that had been simmering below the surface finally boiled over. Jake, you helped plan this wedding. You knew how much it meant to me. You watched me stress over every detail, every vendor, every guest list decision. And you think abandoning me at the altar without a word of explanation isn't meant to hurt me. Linda's strategy shifted from anger to manipulation with practiced ease. Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but think about what you're doing. If you press charges against me, they'll add it to your father's case. He could get even more prison time. Is your wedding really worth destroying your father's life over? The emotional manipulation was so obvious, so calculated, that I almost admired its audacity. Somehow, in Linda's twisted logic, I was the one destroying Dad's life by holding him accountable for stealing from me, not Dad destroying his own life by committing multiple felonies. This was gaslighting on a professional level. Mom, Dad destroyed his own life when he decided to steal from his clients. You destroyed your relationship with me when you decided to steal my inheritance to fix his mistakes. I didn't create this situation, but I'm the only one being asked to sacrifice everything to fix it. Detective Morrison appeared at my elbow, his presence a reminder that this wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was a criminal investigation. Mrs. Carter, I need to remind you that pressuring a victim to drop charges can be considered witness intimidation. Miss Carter is the victim of a crime, and she has every right to pursue justice. Linda's composure finally cracked completely. Justice? Justice? What about justice for a man who's worked his entire life to build something, who made one mistake and is being crucified for it? What about justice for a family that's about to be torn apart because one spoiled little girl can't see beyond her own wants? That's when Kristen delivered the cruelest blow of all. At least now Tyler's family knows exactly what kind of people they're marrying into. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise for him. She looked directly at Tyler as she said it, her meaning clear. I wasn't just being punished for pressing charges. I was being punished for choosing loyalty to Tyler over loyalty to them. The waiting room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of ringing phones. Tyler's family had offered to pay for the wedding vendors to avoid legal complications. They had opened their home to me when mine became toxic. They had shown me more love and support in one afternoon than my biological family had shown me in months. And now my sister was trying to poison that relationship too. You know what, Kristen? You're right about one thing. Tyler's family does deserve to know exactly what kind of people you are. They deserve to know that you're the kind of people who steal from family members, who lie for months, who abandon their daughter and sister at the most important moment of her life, and who then blame her for the consequences of your own actions. I turned to address all three of them, my voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally seen the truth clearly. I'm pressing charges against Mom for theft. I'm pursuing civil litigation to recover my money and damages. And I'm cutting all contact with this family until you can admit what you did and take responsibility for it. If Dad goes to prison, it's because he committed crimes, not because I held him accountable for them. The expressions on their faces shifted from anger to shock to something approaching panic. They had expected me to cave under pressure, to choose family loyalty over justice, to sacrifice my future for their convenience. They had never considered that I might choose my own dignity and well-being over their comfort. Jake made one last desperate attempt. Mel, please. If you do this, there's no going back. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. Kristen and I will have to choose sides. You'll lose your entire family over money. No, Jake. I'm losing my family over their choice to steal from me and lie to me and abandon me. The money is just evidence of how little you all actually value me as a person. I took Tyler's hand and started walking toward the exit. When you're ready to apologize and make real amends, you know where to find me. Until then, I have a life to rebuild. As the station doors slid shut behind us, I heard Linda calling my name one last time, her voice breaking with what might have been genuine grief. But I didn't turn around. I had spent 28 years prioritizing their feelings over my own well-being, and look where it had gotten me. From now on, my loyalty would go to people who had earned it through their actions, not their DNA. The ride back to my apartment was surreal. Tyler drove carefully through the city streets while I sat in the passenger seat, my wedding dress spread across my lap like evidence of dreams deferred. Neither of us spoke much, but his free hand rested on mine, offering silent comfort as we processed the complete destruction of what should have been the happiest day of our lives. When we pulled into my apartment complex, Tyler turned off the engine and looked at me seriously. Mel, I need you to know something. Today doesn't change how I feel about you or how much I want to marry you. Your family's actions aren't a reflection of who you are. He paused, choosing his words carefully. If you're willing, I'd like to go to the courthouse tomorrow and get married there. No big ceremony, no stress, just us and our commitment to each other. The simplicity of his proposal brought the first genuine smile to my face in hours. You want to marry me after watching my family implode our wedding and steal our money? I asked, though my heart was already answering yes. I want to marry you because of how you handled today. You showed more grace and strength under pressure than anyone has a right to expect. You chose truth over comfort, justice over convenience. If anything, today convinced me that I'm marrying exactly the right person. Tyler's parents, Robert and Helen, arrived at my apartment an hour later with Chinese takeout and a bottle of champagne. Helen immediately enveloped me in a hug, still wearing her mother-of-the-groom dress, her eyes red from crying. Sweetheart, we are so sorry about what happened today. No one deserves to be treated the way your family treated you. Robert, a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, surprised me by taking my hands in his. Melanie, I want you to know that Helen and I consider you our daughter, not just Tyler's fiancé. Whatever legal fees you're facing, whatever vendor costs need to be covered, we'll handle it. No family should have to choose between justice and financial survival. Their generosity was overwhelming, but it was their acceptance that meant the most. They had witnessed my family's betrayal firsthand, had seen the worst possible introduction to their future in-laws, and their response was to offer more support, not less. It was a masterclass in what real family behavior looked like. The next morning, while Tyler and I were filling out marriage license paperwork at the courthouse, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Mrs. Henderson, our wedding planner, had posted about our situation on her professional social media accounts, praising how we had handled an unprecedented family crisis with grace and dignity. The story was quickly picked up by local news outlets, and somehow it went viral. Family abandons bride at wedding after stealing inheritance was trending on social media by noon. The response was overwhelming and mostly positive. Strangers were messaging me with stories of their own family betrayals, offering support and understanding. Local vendors reached out offering their services for free to help us have the wedding we deserved. A GoFundMe page appeared, created by someone I didn't even know, to help us recover the stolen funds. But the viral attention also brought scrutiny I wasn't prepared for. My workplace became a hub of gossip as coworkers alternately offered sympathy and whispered speculation about what had really happened. Some people suggested that there had to be more to the story, that families didn't just abandon weddings without good reason. The victim blaming was subtle but persistent, and it added another layer of stress to an already impossible situation. The legal process moved surprisingly quickly. Detective Morrison had built a solid case against Dad's embezzlement, and the evidence of Mom's theft from my account was undeniable. Within a week, both cases were moving through the system, and I was working with a victim's advocate to understand my rights and options. Tyler and I had our courthouse wedding the following Friday afternoon. Helen and Robert stood as our witnesses, and Tyler's sister Emma flew in from Denver to be there. It was simple and beautiful, and everything our original wedding wasn't. Honest, supportive, and focused on our actual commitment to each other rather than external expectations. The media attention also brought an unexpected opportunity. A local TV station asked me to do an interview about family financial abuse, and I discovered that I had a talent for speaking about difficult topics in a way that helped other people feel less alone. The interview led to invitations to speak at support groups and conferences about family estrangement and financial abuse. Within a month, I had connected with dozens of people who had experienced similar betrayals. There was a surprising community of adults who had been financially abused by family members, and many of them told me that seeing my story had given them the courage to seek help for their own situations. The civil lawsuit against Linda proceeded steadily. Her lawyer tried to argue that the power of attorney gave her legal rights to use my money, but Tyler's family had hired an excellent attorney who easily dismantled that argument. Power of attorney doesn't extend to theft, and using someone's inheritance without permission is fraud regardless of account access. But perhaps the most meaningful support came from unexpected places. My college roommate, whom I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, reached out after seeing the news story. She shared that her own family had financially exploited her after her divorce, and we began rebuilding our friendship based on mutual understanding of family betrayal. Several former coworkers contacted me with offers to provide professional references, having experienced their own family drama and understanding how it could affect career prospects. The vendor situation resolved itself better than I had hoped. About half of the companies I had contracted with offered to transfer their services to a future reception, while others provided partial refunds as a goodwill gesture. Tyler's parents insisted on covering the remaining costs, despite my protests. "This is what families do for each other," Helen said firmly. "They support each other through crises instead of creating them." 6 weeks after the wedding disaster, Tyler and I were settling into our new life as a married couple. We had moved to a larger apartment, partly to accommodate his home office, but mostly to create a space that was entirely ours, free from memories of my family's involvement. The walls were decorated with engagement photos and wedding pictures from our courthouse ceremony, and every image showed genuine joy instead of performed happiness. The recovery wasn't just financial. Tyler had suggested we start couples therapy to process the trauma of the wedding day and learn healthy communication strategies for dealing with ongoing family stress. Dr. Sarah Kim became an invaluable guide as we navigated the complex emotions of starting a marriage under such difficult circumstances. 3 months after our courthouse wedding, just as Tyler and I were starting to believe we could move forward peacefully, my family launched what could only be described as a coordinated revenge campaign. It started subtly, with mutual friends mentioning that they had heard another side to the wedding story, one that painted me as mentally unstable and vindictive. Linda had always been a master manipulator, but I had underestimated her willingness to destroy my reputation to save her own. She began reaching out to everyone in our shared social circle, armed with a carefully crafted narrative that positioned her as the grieving mother of a daughter who had suffered a psychological break and was making false accusations against her loving family. The Facebook posts started appearing on Kristen's page first. Carefully worded messages about the pain of watching a family member struggle with mental health issues and the heartbreak of false accusations. She never mentioned my name directly, but everyone in our hometown knew exactly who she was referring to. The posts accumulated dozens of sympathetic comments from family friends who had only heard Kristen's version of events. Jake's approach was more personal and arguably more damaging. He began showing up at places he knew I might be: the grocery store where I'd shopped for years, the coffee shop where Tyler and I had our first date, the gym where I had a membership. Each time, he would create a scene, loudly pleading for reconciliation while portraying me as cold and unreasonable for refusing to forgive a family mistake. The psychological impact of these encounters was devastating. Jake would time his appearances perfectly, showing up when I was alone and Tyler couldn't provide support. "Mel, please, just talk to me," he would say, his voice carrying across the store or restaurant. "Mom's been crying for months. Dad's health is failing in prison. How can you live with yourself knowing you destroyed our family over money?" But the most insidious part of their campaign was the way they weaponized my success. The speaking engagements about family financial abuse, the media interviews, the growing platform I had built to help other victims, they twisted all of it into evidence that I was exploiting our family tragedy for personal gain. Linda created a blog called When Children Turn Against Parents, where she shared her story of raising a daughter who had become addicted to victim status and media attention. She wrote about the pain of watching me destroy innocent family members to maintain my narrative of persecution. The blog gained traction in certain online communities, and I began receiving hostile messages from strangers who believed Linda's version of events. The workplace sabotage was the most professionally damaging aspect of their campaign. Someone, I strongly suspected Jake, who had connections in the business community, began sending anonymous emails to my company's HR department. The emails questioned my mental stability, my reliability, and my professional judgment. They suggested that my public mental breakdown made me unsuitable for client-facing work. My supervisor, Karen, called me into her office on a Thursday morning with an uncomfortable expression. "Melanie, I need to ask you some difficult questions, and I want you to know that I'm on your side here. We've been receiving some concerning communications about your personal situation, and I need to understand what we're dealing with." The anonymous emails had included screenshots of Linda's blog, Kristen's Facebook posts, and even security footage of Jake's public confrontations with me. Whoever was sending them had done their research and presented a compelling case that I was an unstable employee whose personal drama was bleeding into my professional life. Tyler's family wasn't immune to the attacks either. Linda somehow obtained Robert's work email address and sent him a lengthy message about how Tyler had fallen victim to a manipulative woman who was destroying families for attention. She included links to online forums where people were discussing my story, focusing on the few threads where commenters suggested I might be lying or exaggerating. The most devastating attack came when Kristen contacted Tyler's ex-girlfriend from college, a woman named Diana who had never liked me. Kristen fed Diana her version of events, and Diana began posting on social media about how she had always known something was off about me and how sorry she felt for Tyler being trapped with someone so vindictive. Tyler's response to these attacks only reinforced why I had married him. Instead of questioning my version of events or asking me to tone down my advocacy work, he documented every attack and reported harassment when appropriate. He even started his own social media campaign, sharing our actual story and providing evidence of my family's theft and abandonment. But the stress was taking a physical toll. I developed insomnia, constantly checking my phone for new attacks or harassment. My appetite disappeared, and I lost 15 pounds in 2 months. Dr. Kim increased our therapy sessions and suggested I consider medication for anxiety, something I had never needed before the wedding disaster. The legal implications of their harassment campaign became serious enough that our attorney recommended hiring a private investigator. David Chin, a former police detective, began documenting the pattern of harassment and building a case for a restraining order. What he discovered was more organized and malicious than I had imagined. The private investigator found evidence that Linda, Kristen, and Jake had created a shared document where they planned their attacks. They had researched laws about defamation and harassment, carefully crafting their campaigns to stay just within legal boundaries while maximizing emotional damage. They had even created fake social media accounts to amplify negative comments about me and share Linda's blog posts in relevant online communities. Most disturbingly, David discovered that they had been monitoring my social media accounts and public speaking schedule, timing their harassment to coincide with important professional opportunities. When I had a speaking engagement at a conference on family financial abuse, Jake would show up at my apartment building the night before, creating drama that would leave me emotionally drained for the presentation. The evidence David gathered revealed a level of calculated cruelty that shocked even our attorney. This wasn't just angry family members lashing out in grief. This was a systematic campaign designed to destroy my mental health, my marriage, and my professional reputation. The goal was clearly to force me to drop the charges and civil lawsuit by making the cost of pursuing justice higher than I could bear. But their campaign had an unintended consequence. The more they attacked me publicly, the more people began to see through their manipulation. Linda's blog comments section filled with people sharing their own stories of family financial abuse and calling out her victim-blaming tactics. Kristen's Facebook posts began attracting responses from domestic violence advocates who recognized the patterns of abuse in her language. Tyler's family rallied around us with protective fury. Helen started monitoring social media for attacks and responding with factual corrections. Robert used his business connections to counter any professional damage from the anonymous emails. Emma, Tyler's sister, even confronted Diana directly, providing her with evidence of the truth and successfully getting her to delete her negative posts. The harassment campaign ultimately backfired because it demonstrated exactly why I had been right to cut contact with my family. People who had initially wondered if I might have overreacted to a family disagreement could now see the vindictive, manipulative behavior that I had been protecting myself from. The attacks served as real-time evidence of why no contact was the only safe option. The courtroom was packed on the morning of Dad's embezzlement trial, a mixture of his former clients seeking justice, curious locals drawn by the media coverage, and family members from both sides of our destroyed relationship. I sat in the victims section with Tyler, his hand steady in mine as we prepared to watch 2 years of legal proceedings finally reach their conclusion. Dad looked smaller than I remembered, his expensive suits replaced by the standard clothing provided to inmates. The confident accountant who had once balanced the books for half the businesses in town had been reduced to a defendant shuffling in shackles. But when his eyes met mine across the courtroom, I saw no remorse, only a burning resentment that I had chosen justice over family loyalty. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Michelle Torres, had built an airtight case. She methodically presented bank records, forged documents, and client testimony that painted a picture of systematic theft spanning 24 months. Dad hadn't just stolen from 1 or 2 accounts during a moment of desperation. He had carefully, deliberately, and repeatedly violated his client's trust to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, an elderly widow who had trusted Dad with her late husband's life insurance money, testified about losing her house when she discovered that the $43,000 she had saved for her grandchildren's education was gone. Her voice shook as she described calling Dad's office repeatedly, only to be told that market fluctuations had affected her investments. She had believed him because she had known him for 15 years. The prosecution revealed that Dad had used sophisticated accounting tricks to hide the theft for as long as possible. He would temporarily borrow from one client's account to cover another's withdrawal, creating a shell game that eventually became impossible to maintain. When clients began asking serious questions, he had accelerated the timeline, stealing larger amounts more frequently in a desperate attempt to cover earlier thefts. But the most damaging testimony came from Dad's former business partner, Michael Rodriguez, who had discovered the theft and reported it to authorities. Michael testified that he had confronted Dad 6 months before the arrest, giving him a chance to confess and make restitution. Instead of taking responsibility, Dad had accused Michael of jealousy and attempted to forge documents that would make Michael appear complicit in the theft. Raymond Carter looked me in the eye and lied to me about stealing from our clients, Michael said, his voice heavy with betrayal. Then he tried to frame me for his crimes. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a family emergency. This was calculated criminal behavior with no regard for the people he was hurting. When the prosecution presented evidence about the theft of my wedding funds, the courtroom atmosphere shifted. This wasn't just about abstract financial crimes anymore. This was about a father stealing from his daughter and abandoning her at her wedding to cover his tracks. The jury's expressions ranged from disgust to disbelief as they heard how Linda had emptied my account on the morning of my wedding to pay for Dad's legal defense. Ada Torres entered my bank statements into evidence, showing that the $45,000 had been transferred in 3 separate transactions between 6 and 8 a.m. on my wedding day. While I was getting my makeup done and Tyler was putting on his tuxedo, my parents were systematically stealing my future to pay for Dad's past crimes. Linda testified in Dad's defense, but her testimony only made things worse. She claimed that she had always considered my inheritance to be family money and that she had every right to use it for legal expenses. When Ada Torres asked her why she hadn't discussed this decision with me, Linda replied that I would have been too emotional to make a rational choice about family priorities. So you decided to steal your daughter's wedding money and abandon her at the altar because you thought she was too emotional to handle the truth? Ada Torres asked, her voice dripping with incredulity. Linda's response was devastating in its honesty. I decided to protect my husband from going to prison, yes. Melanie is young. She can have another wedding. Raymond can't undo a criminal conviction. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Even Dad's lawyer looked stunned by Linda's casual admission that they had sacrificed my happiness to protect his client. Tyler squeezed my hand as I felt vindicated, but also heartbroken. This was my mother admitting under oath that my wedding day was expendable as long as it served their purposes. Kristen's testimony was equally damaging. She attempted to portray the family as victims of my vindictive prosecution, but when pressed about her knowledge of the theft, she admitted that the family had been planning to use my wedding money for Dad's defense for over 2 months. So the entire family knew about this plan except for Melanie? Ada Torres asked. We knew Dad needed help, and we knew Melanie had money sitting in an account doing nothing, Kristen replied defensively. And did anyone suggest telling Melanie about your father's legal troubles and asking for her help voluntarily? The pause before Kristen answered was telling. We didn't think she would understand the seriousness of the situation. Jake's testimony was perhaps the most painful to watch. He clearly didn't want to be there, caught between loyalty to our parents and the obvious wrongness of their actions. When asked about his role in the wedding day abandonment, he broke down on the witness stand. I knew it was wrong, he sobbed. I knew we were destroying Melanie's wedding day, and I knew she would never forgive us. But Mom and Dad said it was the only way to keep the family together. They said if Dad went to prison, everything would fall apart anyway. Ada Torres pressed him about the decision to leave me at the altar without explanation. Mr. Carter, did anyone suggest calling your sister to explain the emergency, even if you couldn't attend the wedding? Jake's answer was barely audible. Mom said it would be easier if Mel just thought we were running late until after Dad's arraignment. She thought maybe we could fix everything before Mel had to know the truth. The defense attorney tried to paint Dad as a desperate man who had made mistakes under pressure, but the evidence of calculated theft and the family's cruel treatment of me made that narrative impossible to maintain. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing 2 weeks later, Judge Patricia Williams delivered a statement that felt like validation for everything I had endured. Mr. Carter, you have violated the trust of your clients, stolen from your own daughter, and shown no genuine remorse for the devastation you have caused. Your family's attempts to blame the victim of your crimes only demonstrate the toxic environment that enabled your criminal behavior. This court sentences you to 7 years in state prison with full restitution to all victims. Linda's separate trial for theft of my inheritance was much shorter, but equally satisfying. Her lawyer tried to argue that the power of attorney gave her legal rights to use my money, but our attorney had expert witnesses who explained that power of attorney doesn't extend to theft for personal benefit. Linda was sentenced to 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and ordered to pay full restitution plus damages. Outside the courthouse after sentencing, Tyler and I were approached by several of Dad's other victims who wanted to thank me for having the courage to press charges. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly widow, hugged me with tears in her eyes. Honey, if you hadn't been brave enough to speak up, he never would have faced justice for what he did to all of us. The media coverage of the trial was extensive and overwhelmingly supportive. The story of a family stealing from their daughter's wedding fund to cover up embezzlement charges had captured public attention, and most coverage focused on the cruelty of the betrayal rather than the financial crimes themselves. But the most meaningful vindication came in a letter I received from Jake 2 days after sentencing. For the first time since the wedding disaster, he acknowledged the full scope of what our family had done to me and offered a genuine apology without conditions or expectations. It was a small step toward potential healing, but it was the first sign that someone in my biological family might be capable of real remorse and change. 1 year after the wedding that never was, Tyler and I had built a life that exceeded my wildest dreams of what happiness could look like. We had moved to Austin, Texas, partly for Tyler's job promotion, but mainly to create distance from the toxic environment of my hometown. Our new apartment had large windows that filled every room with sunlight, a stark contrast to the dark emotional landscape I had left behind. My speaking career had evolved beyond sharing my personal story to advocating for legislative changes around family financial abuse. I was working with state legislators to draft bills that would create stronger protections for inheritance theft and provide better resources for victims of family financial crimes. The work was emotionally demanding but deeply fulfilling, turning my trauma into a tool for helping others. Tyler's promotion to regional sales manager had come with a significant salary increase, but more importantly, it had brought him into contact with executives who valued my advocacy work. Several companies had hired me as a consultant on workplace policies around employees experiencing family abuse, recognizing that workers dealing with family trauma often need specific support to maintain productivity. The therapy sessions with Dr. Kim had evolved from crisis management to building healthy relationship patterns. We were learning to create traditions and boundaries that reflected our values rather than reacting to my family's dysfunction. Sunday dinners at Tyler's parents' house had become a cornerstone of our week, providing the family stability I had always craved. But rebuilding wasn't without its challenges. 6 months into our new life, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy of the news was immediately complicated by grief over my family's absence from this milestone. My mother wouldn't be there to help me prepare the nursery or share stories about her own pregnancies. Kristen wouldn't be the doting aunt I had always imagined her becoming. The pregnancy highlighted the permanent losses that came with choosing self-protection over family loyalty. Jake had been sending letters consistently, gradually rebuilding trust through actions rather than words. He had voluntarily entered therapy to understand his role in enabling our parents' abuse, and his letters showed genuine insight into the family dynamics that had made their treatment of me possible. When I told him about the pregnancy through a carefully worded email, his response was thoughtful and respectful of my boundaries. But Linda and Dad's attempts to use the pregnancy to force reconciliation were immediate and manipulative. Dad wrote from prison demanding grandparent rights and threatening legal action if I didn't allow contact with the baby. Linda sent baby gifts through mutual friends, each package containing letters about how grandmothers were essential for proper child development. The harassment escalated when Linda hired a lawyer to research grandparent rights laws in Texas. She was apparently under the impression that biological relationships trumped all other considerations, and that courts would force me to allow contact regardless of their history of financial abuse and emotional manipulation. Our attorney quickly assured us that Texas law strongly favors parental decision-making, especially when there's documented abuse. The stress of their renewed pressure campaign was affecting my pregnancy. I developed pregnancy-related anxiety that required medication and additional therapy sessions. Dr. Kim helped me understand that protecting my unborn child from toxic family members was actually excellent parenting practice, not the selfishness my mother's letters claimed it to be. Tyler's family stepped into the emotional gap left by my biological family with remarkable grace. Helen had started knitting baby clothes and researching the best cribs and strollers with the enthusiasm of any grandmother. Robert began talking about setting up college funds and teaching the baby about baseball. Their excitement was genuine and undemanding, offering love without strings attached. The financial restitution from Linda's conviction had been steadily arriving in monthly payments, allowing us to build a substantial emergency fund. But more importantly, Tyler and I were learning to manage money as a team, with complete transparency and shared decision-making. The trust that my family had destroyed was being rebuilt through daily actions and honest communication. My relationship with Jake was slowly improving through carefully managed boundaries. He visited us in Austin twice, staying in a hotel and limiting our interactions to public spaces with Tyler present. The visits were awkward, but showed his genuine commitment to earning forgiveness through changed behavior rather than demanding it based on family obligation. During his second visit, Jake shared that he had cut contact with our parents after witnessing Linda's attempts to manipulate the pregnancy situation. "I finally understood what you'd been trying to tell us," he said quietly. "They're not capable of putting anyone's needs before their own, even their grandchild's. I can't be part of that anymore." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite the emotional stress, and Tyler and I began preparing for parenthood with excitement and determination. We took childbirth classes, read parenting books, and discussed our values and hopes for our child. Every conversation reinforced our commitment to creating a family based on respect, honesty, and genuine love rather than obligation and manipulation. When our daughter Emma Rose was born on a crisp October morning, weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces, the first people we called were Tyler's parents. Helen cried with joy over FaceTime as she got her first look at her granddaughter, and Robert immediately started planning his first grandpa project, building a custom rocking chair for the nursery. The absence of my biological family was noticeable but not devastating. I had expected to feel overwhelming grief about my parents missing their granddaughter's birth, but instead I felt protective satisfaction. Emma Rose would grow up knowing only love and security from her family members. She would never experience the conditional love, emotional manipulation, or financial exploitation that had defined my childhood. Jake sent a beautiful arrangement of flowers to the hospital with a card that simply said, "Welcome to the world, Emma Rose. Your uncle loves you and respects your parents' choices." It was exactly the right tone, acknowledging his relationship to the baby while reinforcing our boundaries and authority as parents. The contrast between Jake's respectful response and our parents' boundary violations was stark. Linda somehow obtained our hospital information and attempted to visit, forcing security to remove her when she became argumentative about not being on our approved visitor list. Dad's prison letters became increasingly desperate and threatening, prompting our attorney to file additional harassment charges. But these incidents only reinforced our decision to prioritize our chosen family over our biological one. Tyler's parents were hands-on, loving grandparents who respected our parenting decisions and offered support without conditions. Our friends from therapy and advocacy work became aunts and uncles who celebrated Emma Rose's milestones without drama or manipulation. 2.5 years have passed since that devastating wedding day that changed everything, and I'm writing this while watching my daughter Emma Rose take her first wobbly steps across our living room into Tyler's waiting arms. Her laughter fills our home with the kind of pure joy that I never thought possible during those dark months of family betrayal and legal battles. The healing didn't happen overnight, and there were moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice in cutting contact with my biological family. But watching Emma Rose grow up surrounded by people who love her unconditionally, who celebrate her achievements without expecting anything in return, who respect her boundaries even as a toddler. I know with absolute certainty that breaking the cycle of family dysfunction was the greatest gift I could give her. Tyler and I celebrated our second anniversary last month with a renewal ceremony in our backyard, surrounded by the family we've chosen and built together. Helen and Robert walked me down the aisle this time, with Emma Rose toddling ahead as our flower girl. It was everything our original wedding should have been. Intimate, joyful, and focused on commitment rather than performance. My advocacy work has expanded beyond what I ever imagined possible. The book I co-authored about family financial abuse became a bestseller, providing resources and validation for thousands of people who had experienced similar betrayals. The speaking engagements have grown into a full-time consultancy, helping legislators draft stronger protections for family abuse victims and training law enforcement to recognize financial abuse patterns. But perhaps the most meaningful work has been the support group Tyler and I facilitate for people who have chosen to cut contact with toxic family members. Every month, we meet with dozens of individuals who are struggling with the guilt and grief that comes with prioritizing their safety over family loyalty. Sharing our story and seeing others find the courage to protect themselves has given our trauma purpose and meaning. Jake has continued his slow journey toward redemption through therapy and changed behavior. He visits twice a year, always respectfully and with advance permission. He's built a genuine relationship with Emma Rose, who calls him Uncle Jake and lights up when she sees him. His transformation from enabler to ally has been remarkable, though it required him to completely restructure his relationship with our parents. Linda and Dad's attempts to force contact have gradually decreased as legal consequences accumulated. Dad was released from prison 6 months ago, but is prohibited from contacting us as part of his parole conditions. Linda violated the restraining order twice and was sentenced to jail time, which finally convinced her lawyer to advise complete silence. The quiet is a relief, though I remain vigilant for new manipulation attempts. The financial restitution is nearly complete, and Tyler and I have used the money to establish college funds for Emma Rose and future children, as well as a charitable foundation that provides legal assistance to family financial abuse victims. Turning the stolen inheritance into a tool for helping others feels like the perfect form of justice. Emma Rose will grow up knowing her origin story, that her parents chose love and truth over comfort and convenience, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even when they share your DNA. She'll understand that family is defined by actions and choices, not biology, and that she has the right to expect respect and kindness from everyone in her life. Tyler's family has become my family in every way that matters. Helen and Robert are incredible grandparents who spoil Emma Rose appropriately and respect our parenting decisions completely. Tyler's sister Emma, whom our daughter is named after, is the kind of aunt I always wanted Kristen to be: supportive, fun, and genuinely interested in Emma Rose's development without trying to undermine our authority. The therapy work continues, though it's shifted from crisis management to maintaining healthy relationships and processing the ongoing grief of family loss. Dr. Kim has helped me understand that mourning the family I wish I'd had is a lifelong process, but it doesn't have to define my happiness or my parenting. Sometimes people ask if I regret pressing charges or cutting contact, wondering if the legal battles were worth the permanent family destruction. The answer is always the same. I regret that my family made choices that required me to protect myself legally, but I don't regret choosing my safety and dignity over their comfort. Emma Rose deserves parents who model self-respect and healthy boundaries, even when those choices are difficult. The speaking engagements and book tours have connected me with thousands of people who share similar stories of family betrayal and recovery. The common thread in every success story is the same. Healing begins when you stop trying to change toxic people and start protecting yourself from them. It's a simple concept, but one that goes against everything we're taught about family loyalty and unconditional love. My grandmother's inheritance ultimately served its intended purpose, just not in the way anyone expected. She wanted to give me the foundation for a beautiful life, and despite my parents' attempts to steal that gift, it became exactly that. The wedding funds may have been stolen, but the strength I found in fighting for justice became the cornerstone of everything good in my life now. Emma Rose's second birthday party last weekend was a celebration of chosen family at its finest. 23 people gathered in our backyard, all of them connected by love and respect rather than obligation. Tyler's coworkers, my advocacy colleagues, our therapy friends, and Jake, all celebrating our daughter with genuine joy and no hidden agendas. As Emma Rose gets older, she'll learn that her Uncle Jake used to make terrible choices, but worked hard to become someone worthy of her trust. She'll understand that her biological grandparents chose destructive behavior over relationships with their family. But most importantly, she'll know that she has the power to choose who gets access to her life based on how they treat her. The legal battles are finally over, the harassment has stopped, and Tyler and I are building the generational wealth and emotional security that will give Emma Rose opportunities we never had. More importantly, we're modeling the kind of marriage and parenting that puts family members' well-being ahead of appearances, truth ahead of comfort, and love ahead of control. Standing in our kitchen this morning, watching Tyler make pancakes while Emma Rose banged on her high-chair tray demanding more syrup, I felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the life we've created from the ashes of that destroyed wedding day. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalysts for the best things we never would have imagined possible. The family that abandoned me at my own wedding taught me exactly what kind of family I never wanted to be. Tyler's family showed me what real love and support look like. And now Emma Rose gets to grow up with the security of knowing that her family will always choose her well-being over their own convenience, her truth over their comfort, and her future over their past mistakes. What would you do if your family betrayed you on the most important day of your life? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else going through a similar situation. If this video helped you understand family financial abuse or gave you courage to set boundaries with toxic relatives, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family dysfunction. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose your peace over other people's comfort, even when those people are family. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope you find the courage to write your own ending, whatever that looks like for you. You deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate your happiness instead of sabotaging it, and you have the power to create that life for yourself and your children.